Great, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining us today. Good to have you here. Just to introduce you to the rest of the audience who have tuned in today to get an insight into Etihad and your role in Etihad and how you are confronting the COVID-19 challenges from a human perspective. But Andrew Stotter-Brooks is the Vice President of Learning and Development in Etihad. He's an HR professional that has over 30 years of senior human resource management experience, and that's across a number of different industries in retail, leisure, and indeed aviation. Prior to arriving in Abu Dhabi and taking up this role with Etihad, Andrew has worked for 7 years with Al Shire Group, and in that role he was a head of learning and supported the career development of more than 90,000 people in that organization around the region. And that actually didn't just cover the region, Andrew, that covered 19 different countries, didn't it? And even prior to that, deep experience within this area of expertise in L&D. But let me cut in. So, I mean, that's great to have you here. Clearly, you're an expert in your field. You and I have known each other for some time, and I experience and I relish talking to you in terms of your experience within the region and what you bring to the game. And setting the tone for our conversation today, this really is very much about getting an inside view, if you like, in the hot seat with which you are tasked in terms of dealing with COVID-19 in these challenging times. And so it would be really interesting, I guess, for us in the audience, just to get a quick insight into the fact that, because you were here prior to COVID and then COVID came, what was the initial impact in terms of L&D and the human element within Etihad at the onset of this challenge?
So I think to start with, so thank you very much for your kind words. We actually have we had a very, very clear strategy around the way that we were going to deliver learning anyway. Coming in, and you know, I'm kind of a person never to kind of waste a great crisis. You know, this was a very unfortunate situation that we found ourselves in. I was very, very lucky. I think we were lucky as a team that we'd done a lot of preparation, kind of moving in this kind of direction as far as remote learning and micro learning, as I like to call it. So we'd already had a very clear strategy around the way that we were going to map our learning out across the organisation, and sort of the process that we'd already been following towards that, actually, when COVID came in, was just rapidly expanded. Because we had got a little bit of resistance around using sort of virtual technology. So, you know, I call VILT, so virtual instructor-led sessions. We run in tens and, you know, dozens and dozens of countries around the globe. We have lots of outstations, lots of outreach. We have lots of different nationalities. So therefore, one of the big opportunities for us as we saw it was actually taking a lot of our learning into this kind of micro format. Because if you look at how this generation, I come from an older generation now, and the way that I was used to or exposed to learning traditionally was in a workshop. I'd go face to face. And the problem with face-to-face workshops, they are very, very beneficial, but the reality, you can't revisit it. So you might spend some time with someone like me and we may go face to face on a topic. But the reality of that is that once that topic's finished, that you can't kind of press rewind and go back to it. We have obviously things like YouTube now. We have incredible resources on the internet, and a lot of people, if they want to learn how to make a brownie or a cookie, or they want to do something, they want to, you know, I know, for example, hang a picture, for example, probably, well, I may make a Thai curry. You know, one of the things I would probably go and do first of all, if I want to make a Thai curry because my wife wants a Thai curry, I'm going to go and Google it. I'm going to probably watch some ingredients, find out, you know, find some top chef who's going to teach me. I'm not going to be able to do it as well as him or her, but the reality is it's a really great place to start. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of been our approach. And what I can do is, obviously, when I'm sourcing the ingredients, I'm cooking the curry or making the cookie, I can pause the camera, I can pause the footage, I can kind of reflect on that. And I can perhaps watch it 6 times, you know, particularly if there's a complicated maneuver that's going on. It's really cool. And we've actually been using it quite clever. We've been using even things like teaching juggling I'm a massive juggler, unicyclist, kind of fire eater from my distant past, and actually bringing in things like very innovative and juggling. We did a lot of juggling in Etihad before we went to lockdown, and we haven't stopped juggling. Juggling was a great mechanism for me because it really helps people to kind of free their mind up. So to be able to juggle, you need to be able to do sort of multitask and understand multiple things. And just the sheer act of getting people on a screen, I got some beautiful videos actually of people juggling oranges and apples and lemons and stuff as part of workshops. Yeah, it is really
exactly
useful.
What everything, yeah, exactly. And so I hear that I guess the hurdle of going to virtual has been overcome. The micro learning element that you've said, you're already on a journey. So I get that journey now is a little bit more on steroids. Is that right? Or what were the hurdles that hit that strategy that was in play in terms of engagement, I guess, that you've perhaps had to sort of adapt slightly?
I suppose, gosh, I'm talking 20 years ago now. So 20 years ago, I used to deliver a lot of virtual instructor-led sessions in the kind of, I suppose, in the dark days of the technology. So I was doing a lot of that kind of stuff early doors. I suppose I'd forgotten some of the skills. A lot of the guys who are now facilitating for me in that space, obviously at the beginning were quite uncomfortable because they're much used to doing ILT, instructor-led sessions, and then suddenly going to virtual is difficult. I was doing a session with our CEO a few weeks ago, and it's when you're talking to 2,500 people around a topic, and I'm in my son's bedroom. That's the challenge. So it's actually drawing the motivation to actually continue speaking. That's been a major challenge. We're regularly doing sessions where we're seeing sort of 300-400 people coming into workshops with me, with our teams. Guest speakers, I sort of co-facilitate with guest speakers from all sorts of places. We've had Harvard University, many sort of like world famous universities have come on to us. Lots of professors have been working with me and sort of giving me their insights. And what we've found is that we've been really pushing the boundaries about using kind of multiple platforms. So there's a fantastic couple of tools. There's Mentimeter. I'm sure you're familiar with Mentimeter. Poll Everywhere is a huge, a particular favourite of mine at the moment. And we obviously use Microsoft Teams in our facilitation, our VILT, but using Poll Everywhere and chat, we can actually very rapidly poll large audiences, even if it's things like word clouds, it's polls or it's location. So one really great thing that we've been doing recently is putting a globe up. So I put a map of the world onto the screen as we're kind of warming up the audience, because often audiences arrive in a staggered fashion. They may arrive 15 to 20 minutes before the kickoff starts. So we need to kind of entertain them. And that's actually fantastic. So having a globe up on the screen and asking people to put in, to tag it where they are sitting at the moment in the world is just amazing. I can't actually understand the behavior. I'm getting people coming in from Chicago and from Sydney, and it's like 3 in the morning. And they're actually getting up to come and listen to us, which I find completely staggering. It's also quite amazing for other people to understand that Etihad is such an enormous organisation in so many different locations. So I think it helps with participants being on the call because they recognise that they're actually, it may seem very personal, but actually talking to someone maybe in London who's having a conversation with someone in Sydney or Chicago. So yeah, very, very interesting tool.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting, right? Because you're such a diverse organization with people across the world, and everybody's been affected in the same way with similar challenges. And how is it that as an organization you've been able to I guess maintain that engagement? And the truth is that you've as an organization you've had to go through massive challenges, and so maintaining that engagement, that motivation and so forth, what are some of the things that have really shown up anew for you during this period?
Obviously, well, there's probably a couple of things that I think work very, very well for me. I think the first one is I have an enormous, probably not the world's biggest WhatsApp group, but close. We have more than 7,000 people now who get daily updates from us. That's really useful. So
the L&D,
we're able to kind of like the L&D function. Yeah, it's my phone. So my phone has multiple WhatsApp groups. We have in excess of 7,000 people who receive daily updates. I think you're probably one of the people who I bombard with learning. We're quite precise, so we've been on a very good journey. We have 8 knowledge areas that were agreed by the business, and those knowledge areas are, we spoke about how we sell product, and that's really linked back to customer service and understanding our customers' needs. There's this piece around how we work as teams and leadership development. That's important. So that's the teams piece. So sell and teams, a huge thing. And obviously we're in the space you all kind of are, which is coaching. So we have a huge push on understanding coaching and working with coaching. Then we have a massive piece around how we plan and organize our times, projecting, and and just depending on the complexity of the career level, I'll probably talk more about that in a second. Yeah. There's a huge piece around how we create impact and influence. So we've been doing a lot of workshops around impact. We also have a massive piece around numbers. I think numbers is one of the challenging areas for many, many people, particularly if you don't work in finance. And most of us, including myself, we struggle with mathematics at school. But actually, when we come into sort of leadership roles in organisations, we have to be pretty good at maths, which causes us some big challenges. So, but actually, even at a micro level, understanding how my actions impact the financial profitability of organisations is important. So running workshops around that. 2 others kind of bigger areas. Obviously, the final 2 is a big piece around culture and our values. So linking back to we have pride as a set of values within Etihad. So how we kind of like deliver and link all of our learning content to that. And then the final one is around how we manage change. Particularly, it's actually probably the most, almost if I was looking into a crystal ball, bringing change in. I suppose as an organisation, we've been going through a lot of change anyway. But then, of course, with COVID and that kind of arriving on the scene so abruptly, the ability to actually understand change and the emotions of change has been very, very useful for us. So we have basically broken down our organisation. I'm a very simple man. I'm not the brightest man on the planet. And I try to keep things as simple as I can for my learner. And so we've kind of said, right, so there's 5 levels of learning within the organisation, starting from kind of entry point employees right the way through to our senior executives. So we have 5 basic steps that kind of move through the organisation. Each of those steps look at maybe the level of experience you would need in, for example, coaching or selling or impact, perhaps the complexity of the topic, which might change in finance, from doing basic percentages to actually creating a budget or a forecast or reading a P&L. The complexity changes. So we've basically structured our content. So if you do the kind of basic maths, and as I said, I'm not an expert here, so please feel free to correct me, but we have 5 career levels across the organisation, and we have 8 knowledge areas across the organisation. So 5 times by 8 gives me 40. People often say, well, where do you get 40 from? It's like, okay, 5 by 8 is 40. And then we've then built out a curriculum around those 40 kind of modules. And it's also very useful because it means that people can map their career with us as well. So if I come in and I start in a junior role, it's very easy for me to understand what I would need to know at a more senior level in the organisation. Yeah. And that enables us to then create those career paths. And so I have this tag, obviously, as part from being brilliant, I often talk about owning it. So, I'm a huge fan of making sure that I provide information for my learner, make sure that she understands what she needs to do, and can take responsibility. I'm not sure whether I told you a very funny story. On the 9th of May, 2019, I was very fortunate enough to be in Red Square in Moscow with a very good friend of mine called James. And we'd been watching a lot of fantastic kind of goose stepping and military hardware sort of rolling through with Vladimir Putin sort of saluting and taking this incredible parade. And it was just, the atmosphere there was just electric. I mean, you can't imagine how amazing it was. And we fancied a coffee, as simple as that. And we went to a Starbucks, just literally 100 meters away from Red Square. And when I walked into Starbucks, it was a very interesting moment for me because I'd only been in Russia for 2 days, and I'd only been in Moscow for 2 days. We later went on and did a bit of another journey. But as I walked into Starbucks, the barista in the Starbucks immediately recognized me. It was a very bizarre thing, actually. She said, "Oh, you're Andrew Stotts." Yeah. And I said, "Wow." I said, how do you know me? I'm so flattered that you know who I am, but how do you know me? She goes, "Well, you're on my phone. You're on my phone." you're kind of, so I actually with that organization I had 13,000 people in my WhatsApp group. So that was a small percentage, but it was a bigger percentage, I suppose, than we've currently got to Etihad. But it was, so we were reaching large populations with micro learning and sending people simple learning. But the interesting point about the learning.
Yeah, sorry, Andrew. It's kind of that frequency, the micro learning, the coverage. Those sound like those are very important elements here in terms of how you're driving this shift.
Yeah, I mean, we think, Nick, it's exactly right, because if you think about how a human being learns something, our retention, unfortunately, is probably less than about 70% within 24 hours. Yeah, so I might listen to Andrew Stott or Nick or someone presenting an idea. I think importantly, I might think I got it. I might think I actually understand it. But the reality is that within 24 hours, I've probably forgotten about 70% of what I've heard. So that's a challenge. So if we continuously top up that knowledge, daily, and we give people the opportunity, we originally set ourselves a project that we wouldn't make anything longer than 3 minutes, for example, but it sounds completely crazy. Wow, 3 minutes, what value can you get in 3 minutes? But what we've actually found is completely the contrary to that. So we've actually now we're in the kind of 30-second to 90-second space, because people like it, so we send in, and if I look at my analytics around viewing numbers, which are just astronomical, by the way, we've seen a 500% increase in learnership and people attending workshops and watching content. It's just staggering. The numbers are just mind-blowing for me. But it's because it's micro, because people think, oh, I can do 90 seconds, I can do 30 seconds. But I can't do 20 minutes, or I can't do an hour, and I definitely can't do 2 or 3 hours, but I can do 30 seconds, And if I then want to take ownership of that learning, and I want to kind of find out more, here's another link, and here's a book, or here's some content I can go and do some deeper research on it. So that's why I think micro learning works so well. It's back to my cookie thing, or my Thai curry. If I want to learn more about how to make Thai cuisine, I go and get a book and I go and research it, but I don't really need that. All I want to do is make dinner for my wife, and I'm basically going to go and get the recipe, and that's all I need. I need that information quickly. And if I want to go and make that curry next week, I might go back to the video, but probably I've remembered a little bit about what happened. I've had an experience of making it, applying it, and then obviously I understand, and it was tasty, so that's cool. So, we have another tool that I obviously deploy a lot, which again, is like what we call a no-do-be model. So we look at what an individual should know across those 8 knowledge areas, across the 5 levels of complexity. Mm-hmm. We look at how they would then take and apply that knowledge. And so that's the do. And that's really in a beautiful kind of like framework, which we've created. So we've got the knowledge required. And I think for a learner, it's important that I understand that when I go back to my office or my aeroplane or my engineering section, I know how I'm going to demonstrate that behavior. Mm-hmm. And actually even more important, that the manager knows what she's looking for in that employee. And then finally, both of them understand why it's important to know around numbers, or know around impact, or know around coach, or know around plan. And it doesn't matter where you work. If you work in your cabin crew, or your pilot, or you're in engineering, or you work in HR, or you work in the canteen or in catering division, planning is still important. It doesn't make any difference if it's where you work. So just keeping things really simple and reminding people continuously. And then of course the final piece for us is, which is where we're going on our journey, is this piece around how we measure employees. Mm-hmm. And then sort of linking that into a talent process that so the employee understands precisely where she is, which kind of loops me back to the lady in Russia, where the lady in Moscow, where she's able to basically understand precisely how she fits into the organization, and she gets a much bigger picture. So it's been a very fascinating journey. I think it is definitely the future of learning. We're still in our infancy. We're learning every day. We're learning new tricks. Even old dogs like me, we can learn new tricks. But I definitely see that everyone now, these devices here. I mean, everyone has those devices, of course, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world, you have that device. And secondly, there's always been a bit of resistance, definitely in my previous organisations. I've never heard it here. I've never ever had resistance here, but in Etihad, but definitely in previous life, where the words personal device, you know, they don't want to use their personal device for work. They don't want to use their personal device for work learning. It's a personal thing for their own use. That is utter rubbish. You know, people, they don't mind using their personal devices. They understand how they're learning and growing. So, you know, this kind of excuse, well, you know, they're not company phones. Everyone should have a company phone. No, no one needs a company phone. Just all they need to do is they need to take responsibility for their learning. I mean, the 7,000 learners in my WhatsApp group, they are basically learning. It's voluntary, so we don't make them do anything. We show them how they can do it, and we give them great content. But if they don't want to do it, that's absolutely fine. You know, no one's pressuring these guys to do this. And we have I said we have hardly any attrition in people sort of dropping out.
So it's, I mean, fantastic to get this insight into what you guys are doing in Etihad, Andrew. And, you know, I guess there'll be huge takeaways for everybody listening in. But what, in terms of your experience of what you've been through in the last few months, just the last few months, what would be some of the key learnings for you in that role that now are supporting those next steps forward? You know, what are the aha moments that you've experienced just fairly recently?
I suppose the first, we've been experimenting with some new technology literally this week, and gosh, you know, I'm a remote worker, and that's been a massive challenge for me. So of course, everything we're producing around these kind of micro videos and the new stuff we're doing is just amazing, because we're doing a lot more animation and bringing a lot more kind of like really quite a bit more fun stuff in. But we're doing it I'm doing it in my son's bedroom. I think that's the important thing. So we're not, you know, we're not, and I think that's the big kind of, because of course I want to make my content, you know, very professional. I used to make videos for Hilton. We were spending like $1 million, you know, to make one video. You know, it would be like a 6-month project, and it would be amazing. I'm not talking about, I mean, it would be like, you know, Oscar-winning, amazing video content. I mean, it would be brilliant. So I'm not saying that that's not important, but it's the fluidity and it's the speed of turning things around. So, you know, we're able to kind of like really focus and push things quickly. We have a very structured plan. Of course, we know whether we're delivering our knowledge to the business, but we're able to turn it and flip it really quickly. I've got a fantastic, you know, Etihad, an amazing organization. I have an incredible iPad that I use. I have this kind of technology. I can make video. I can make video very, very quickly. I can animate video very, very quickly. I've got a brilliant guy in my team who's he's just passionate about making videos. It's not his main role. I'm able to kind of, his name's Omar. I mean, he's been brilliant for me, and he's kind of really engaged, and he's my kind of like my editor in chief. And we kind of send him content. We make stuff we do sound bites. He kind of like, he's very creative, but he's just doing it on his Mac in his bedroom. You know, he's not some guy sitting in Universal Studios. You know, he's a guy just like me, and we're just collaborating over Teams, over WhatsApp. We have conversations around, you know, will this work, will that not work? So I think probably one of the biggest learnings for me is the speed that we can put content out into the organization. It's not as sharp as I'd like it to be, but sometimes the reality of that is that, you know, is the sharpness as important as the message? I think as long as the message is clear, it's, you know, I look at it, oh gosh, but I think that's the challenge. A lot of people are very nervous around doing it. One of the things that I get personally, and we are making some kind of ground on this. People are quite nervous. I was having a conversation a few minutes ago with someone else, actually. We were talking about the nervousness of people turning their cameras on in things like Teams. I don't know why they're so nervous to turn their camera on, because at the end of the day, I go to my sort of senior meetings, and I'm probably one of only 2 people, maybe the only person who turns their camera on. If you think about how human beings communicate, you know, most of our communication, most of our comms is non-verbal, right? Yeah. So I think one of the big challenges is, you know, and I don't want to be forcing people to turn cameras on, because it's not my style. But I think there's huge benefit in turning your camera on. It's difficult for me. I have to, you know, I'm sitting in my own bedroom, and I don't mind, you know, I'm wearing shorts, you know, so I've just shattered your illusion. But I haven't worn shoes for 12 weeks. So I'm slightly concerned about putting shoes on. But the reality is that, you know, people, we still, as human beings, we like to communicate, non-verbally. Most of our comms goes that way. And when I'm in meetings, rather than, I can give a thumbs up. I can smile, I can kind of do this.
Learning, isn't it, Andrew? It is still a new world. And while we've become a lot more comfortable with it, literally within months, I mean, none of us could have imagined that you and I would be having this conversation. I've got this backdrop here, we're both in our own homes, and here we are, we're talking about how the world's changed. And yet there's still a level of, there's an edge there for some people in terms of presenting themselves and softening that edge, right? There's a vulnerability piece here that I think from a human perspective, in terms of how do we present ourselves as the most professional, and does that fit that scenario? Can I be vulnerable in that place? And I think this is part of the new journey for all of us in terms of how we're engaging with people. And you've just talked about it there. What is the level of engagement? Yes, we're having the conversation, but that could be a deeper conversation if you and I were looking each other in the eye, and I could see some of the movement and the facial expressions and so forth, which would show up during that process. So it's really interesting. Andrew, as we close off today, firstly, I want to seriously thank you for your input today. It's been super interesting. But I guess just kind of one final thought from you in terms of the future of L&D, in terms of Etihad. What does that look like? What are maybe one idea that is showing up for you in terms of the future and your role and how to impact the business?
I suppose the biggest thing for me is giving people the opportunity to empower themselves, and it's using technology that we are absolutely swimming in. It's just everywhere we turn. It doesn't matter what your career level, your experience. It's everywhere. The thing that scares me, I think I'm pretty good at technology. I'm actually rubbish at it. If I'm really honest, I'm very low self-awareness around my skill of technology. But if I talk about my son and my daughter, who are in their early 20s, and I then look at my my niece and my nephew, who are sort of in their in their 10s or their teens, their ability to use their technology is just like 10 times better than my son and my daughter, and that's the future. The future is that kind of micro learning library of content, easily accessible when I need it for a particular moment. We have these toolkits, right? Most of us, definitely, mine's particularly big, so I'm rubbish at DIY, ask my wife. But we all have these kind of like what masquerades as a toolkit in our house. And when I go to my toolkit, if I want to put a picture up, it'd be very brave in my house if I'm putting a picture up. But if I'm trying to do something, mechanically with a spanner or a hammer, there's different tools, right? So we go to our toolkit and we then kind of grab that tool and we apply that tool. I think that's the future of learning. I've got a need for something. It's going to be coaching or planning or presenting, or I want to work out, I've forgotten how to work out a percentage. And I go to my toolkit and I kind of grab the tool and someone like me virtually says, this is how you do it. And you go, of course, yeah, I've remembered. So I think we've got to be really brave. We've got to really kind of like take that moment. It's nervous, it's nerve-wracking, particularly for learning professionals. We're moving into different space. As I said, when you're speaking to big groups of individuals, I'm very fortunate that I've been in environments where, I've done that face-to-face, and it's a lovely experience. You draw energy from your audience massively. We have to kind of get over ourselves, and we have to kind of say, right, well, I'm going to be sitting in my son's bedroom, and I'm going to be, I have to kind of draw from my inner experience to do that. So yeah, so they're the big challenges, really. Embracing into the technology, really listening to the audience, understanding what she wants, I think is critical. I would say there's kind of two secrets really, Nick. The first is just to absolutely do your best every day. Yeah. I would say there's no substitute for that. Whatever happens in my world, and I make mistakes every day. I mean, I'm like I'm the king of mistakes. So I make a lot of mistakes, but it's never intentional, and it's always and I'm always learning from those mistakes. But I kind of think when I put my little head on the pillow at the end of the night, I've given it everything. I've done everything I can to help my audience. I've done everything in my power. often it's not enough, but I've tried my best, and I can balance myself. When I'm hitting the pillar, I go, yeah, I've done everything I can today to try and do what I'm trying to do for the organisation and for my learners. And then the second thing, which I think is equally critical, and for anyone listening, it's understanding what your customer needs.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter who the customer is, if it's the CEO or if it's the HRO, or it's the chief person, whoever it is, or it's the child in front of you, or learner. What does she need from that? Trying to put yourself in her position, or in his position, or in her, whoever it is, put yourself in their position, because that is so insightful. And often we're attached to the way that we like to do things, and often the way that we like to do things is perhaps alien to other people. So two things, give it your best. Often it's not going to be enough, but hey, at least you've given your best. And secondly, understanding what other people need from you and trying to service that need is going to make you much more effective when you're working with your learners.
Fantastic, Andrew. Listen, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate your insight and fantastic work that you're doing over there in Etihad under challenging circumstances like everybody. And I know that there'll be a lot of takeaways from the people listening in. So thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to connecting with you again very soon. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be invited. So of course, if anyone needs anything from me, questions, just reach out, just ask. Superb. Thanks, Nick.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Andrew.
Take care.